Okay, we are live here and welcome to the second segment of Quantum Leap. We're excited to have the man who literally wrote the book on sales on our show, but every great salesperson knows. And it's funny that, I haven't necessarily researched a lot of sales books, but in the time I've been studying business, your book and the book that Jason Cutter, the other guy Cory was going to introduce you to, are the two best books on sales that I've come across. So, Bob Arzt, we're excited to have you, and we're going to get to you in just a second. I did want to just give Cory another chance to introduce himself on this second segment because they're really two separate segments. If you don't want Cory just telling us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, hey everyone, Cory and I here, co-host with David on this Quantum Leap podcast, and I do business coaching and consulting with more of a focus on growing a community of people who want sort of this a la carte coaching and training. And our new focus starting in February is accountability groups. So the ability to come in and say, I'm going to do these things, and then come back the next day and say, I did it or I didn't do it. Here's a little bit of what happened, but we're kind of avoiding the coaching and very positive feedback is the intention, to just help people keep those agreements with themselves and with others.
Great. And I don't know if you introduced me to Bob or Bob was in our key network here in the East Bay. And I know you spoke highly of him because he's a support director and a person in the B&I leadership along with you, and you sponsor me into that. And Bob actually used to work in the financial services industry, insurance, and he really went into, so he's picked up some very unique skills and knowledge on coaching, and he wrote this book which I'm going to just have him talk about, but it's really such a exciting and unique book that I feel like is knowledge that you can use. It's not just a academic book. It's about something that you can put into practice right away to improve your sales. And with that, I'm going to just have you tell us who you are, Bob, and a little bit about your story. And then we're going to lead right into this book as well.
All right, excellent. Well, David and Cory, thank you for having me on again. I appreciate that very, very much. So the abbreviated version is my dad got me into the insurance business in an unusual way. Unfortunately, he passed away when I was 18. The last 2 years of his life was in the insurance industry. And he said to me, if he ever had his life to live all over again, he wished he would have gotten involved in the financial services industry. It took me a number of years to get there, but I finally did. And when I did, it opened up a whole new world for me. I happened to work in an agency of a great company, and they were a great agency within that company. And so I thrived as a salesperson, and that led to a career in sales management. I did well in the field. That got the home office's attention, and that catapulted me into a career in the corporate office, eventually becoming an officer of several different companies that I worked in. But I seemed to always attract people into my office before hours, during hours, after hours. We used to have these wonderful conversations. So fast forward many years, I decided to start my own coaching business. And this year marks my 20th year in coaching. So that's my story.
That's great. And it's funny that it seems like a lot of business coaches, they actually come out of a strength in sales because it's almost impossible to be successful in business or wildly successful without a great knowledge of sales, I would say, and great experience. And you're unique in that you learn this in one of the most challenging industries to do sales, most competitive, I should say, in that and then you learned all these other topics that make you great at coaching. But if you don't, we're going to really focus on sales today. I do want to ask a question about calendar at some point, maybe as a wild card question, but could you just tell us why you wrote this book and what you were trying to do with this book?
So the idea for the book came before I even thought about the book or going into business for myself. But when I was in corporate, we used to hire outside consulting firms to profile our leading salespeople. And they then created a competency model, a profile of our top folks. And then they said, here are the characteristics of your top people. So when you recruit new salespeople, look for these characteristics. And I forget how much we paid the firm to do that, but it was a substantial sum of money. So fast forward to starting my own coaching business, we decided to write the book for various reasons, one of which was sometimes when you recruit a salesperson, they're lucky in working in an office that is wonderful, but not all offices are wonderful. And I was trying to put something together for the least common denominator. I wanted to be the voice with practical action steps and ideas that people could follow that would help them be successful in sales. So we go back to the competency models, and we figured after much research, there's a zillion of them, right? And every company is a little bit different, but there were some in common. And we broke them down into actually 15 different sales success factors in 4 clusters. Those clusters were mastery of self, mastery of the sales process, mastery of customer relationships, and mastery of your own business. And from that, we created an assessment where each of the factors has 5 questions. Then there's 1 chapter devoted to each of those factors. And in the chapter, we attempted to tell people what that factor is, what it isn't, how do you know if you have it or not, what are some practical things you can do to improve. And then I included some case studies from my coaching practice. So it isn't a book that's meant to be read cover to cover. I tell people, if you do nothing else, read the case studies. You will probably see some of yourself within those case studies.
Great. I was just listening to a book on tape, a classic tribal leadership today, and they said, if you create that culture, everything else will come from a good culture. But, a lot of times, that's basically revamping the whole organization. And, I think compare everything to politics, of course. And if you have a toxic culture, that creates kind of toxic results. So I think if we could, in your business or in politics, in our local environment, if we can have a good culture, then a lot of good things will flow from that. And I think, if you think of a sales office, if you have people helping one another and a culture of learning and improving versus an ultra competitive kind of cutthroat environment, you already see what you're going to do the best in. And that's just a little aside of mine on culture. But if you kind of flip through the book, you can't really see it from there, but it's a workbook where you actually allow people to, dive into things. And, I know Tony Robbins does this great in his books, and some of the other that it really looks like it was written by an expert, of somebody who you got to kind of go within yourself to find some of these answers and not just kind of passively read it. You actually have to do the work to become better. And that's what I love behind the theory of this book. And you can find it on Amazon. And I don't know if you use this in some of your coaching. I assume if somebody became a coaching client, you would teach them everything in this book.
One way or the other, we get around to it. I also made it available as a free PDF download, which people can go to my website, polaris1.com, and obtain it for free.
Okay, great. I'll put the link to your website in there so people can download it. And I just love having a hard copy of it. It's great that my sales library consists of this book and Jason Cutter's book, and they're both excellent books. I really look forward to working with them. Cory, I'm going to turn it over to you to debrief on any of that in the second part of the interview.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. I think it's important to have these kind of systems. And we used to get a lot of coaching from the top salespeople in Incentive. And the one thing that they always told us at the beginning, when you become a coach, is it's like, you're not a coach, you're a salesperson. you get to coach when you sell, right? And unless, of course, there's somebody else doing the work for you, in which case you're probably not going to be very well compensated because it's a lot of work, right? Yeah, I think at the beginning they said, it's 4 hours of marketing and sales to get 1 hour of coaching. Kind of was sort of the early formula for somebody starting out. Once you're in it for a while, things get a little easier. You can start to reverse that, but you can't if you don't have those tools. And so anything we can do to improve our systems and figure out where our soft spots are really, really helps. And in financial planning, it's even more of a numbers game, I'm sure. We both know a couple of people who have been very successful at sales in that, and just to listen to their stories is always inspiring. So that's what Bob's book is all about. So what is your why, Bob? What would you say that, what really drives you about the coaching aspect of your business?
So again, I need to go back to my start in financial services. Graduated, and I entered college in the business school, and after a semester switched to liberal arts and had a psychology degree, but figured out that wasn't where I wanted to be. So by the time I got into insurance sales, I was really at a loss as to what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I was so fortunate to be in that agency, that sales agency, that opened up the world to me. They helped me become all that I was capable of. And that became a mantra for me, for my business, to help people become all that they're capable of. I met a lot of fascinating people along the way. Someone once said to me, "Who in your life saw more in you than you saw in yourself? And what did that mean to you? And how did it make you feel? And how did it impact your goals and your success?" And when you think about it, most coaches have a 100% commitment and positive regard for their clients and see the best in their clients. It can be frustrating at times because coaching is not a quick process necessarily. It takes time to build people from the inside out. So my why is to help people become all that they're capable of becoming, assuming, of course, that that's what they want. Every now and then you pick up a client who wants that, but isn't willing to do what they need to do to get there. So those engagements don't tend to last very, very long, but life is too precious to waste. People should be happy. They should achieve what they want to achieve. And there's tools and methods to help people get there.
I agree. I just did a coaching program this weekend, learning some new skills, and much more focused on like the in the moment listening type coaching, and which could go with any kind of brand, but it is amazing what even just the little things that we can help people get past. And occasionally there are people who are just not coachable. They don't want to be, they don't want to share anything. So why would you say that sales, career vision, and mission are important in sales?
Yeah, so one of the areas of expertise that I have is in goal achievement. And in my workshops, I joke a little bit. I say, most people aim at nothing, yet hit that bullseye with amazing accuracy. So when you're in sales or in life, really, you need to have some guiding principles. You need to know where you're going. You need to know how you're going to get there. So your vision is that futuristic, this is how it's going to look down the road. And I'm just reminded that I'm watching the Olympics now, and I was watching the freestyle skiers doing those crazy jumps. And you see them before the jump close their eyes and they go through all of the motions, right? Visualizing the outcome that they want. So visualization is important. And mission, of course, relates to what are you going to do for your customers? How are you going to treat them? That will help you obtain customers and retain them as well. Oddly enough, vision and mission also helps you with time management because it helps you make decisions based on where you want to go. So if I want to go over there, and this activity is taking me in the opposite direction, I probably shouldn't spend time over there. I should spend time doing the things that are going to get me where I want to go. So having that clear vision and mission, I think, is important. And that's how we start the book around a sales career. What do you want out of a sales career?
Nice. Yeah, I'm very big on the mission and vision, and let's focus on the sales part of it, of course, but it is always important to keep people on track. Like, is that in line with your mission? Some entrepreneurs just love those shiny baubles. I know I do. And so what would you say is the psychology of sales success?
So this is multiplicity of factors, right? So the example that I like to give in terms of being in flow, you come into sales, it's like you're on the side of a stream and you jump in. You could swim upstream against the current. You could still achieve your goals. You could still get there, but you're going to be putting forth a lot of effort. Or you could swim downstream with the flow, where things seem to come a little more easily and a little bit more naturally. So what are some of those factors? We've talked about some already. That goal clarity component, knowing your vision and mission is one of those components. Belief in yourself and in your product is another big component. If you're always battling with yourself, can I do this? Do I believe enough in myself to make it happen? That's going to slow you down. What are your values? Do you act in a way in your sales that are consistent with your values? Another factor I would say is a supportive environment, and that comes into several factors. It could be as simple as your desk arrangement as an environment. It could be the company you work for, the agency you work in. It could be your family, the supportive environment there. So all of these factors need to be in harmony to have the most positive outcomes. If any of these factors are fighting with each other, it doesn't mean that you won't achieve what you want to achieve. It just might take you a little bit longer to get there. You might have to do some problem solving along the way, but you want to give yourself the best opportunity for success. And I tell people, there's more than one right way to be successful in any given business. However, it's like putting a pot of water on the stove and putting a flame under the pot. The water's going to boil. You don't have to believe that it's going to boil. It's just physics. It's going to boil. So if you follow the right steps consistently, and you always try to improve on those steps, you'll get to where you want to be.
Great. And Cory, I thought maybe we could just ask our wild card question here on calendar, and then go to the last question to close out. And Cory, and feel free to ask a follow-up on this, but Bob, I know you've really presented some powerful ideas on how to control your calendar. If you don't mind just kind of introducing this concept and why people should look at their calendar is really something that drives their success instead of just kind of like a afterthought.
Thank you for asking. This is huge, and it needs a little background. So first, you have goal clarity. If you know where you're going to go, then you have to figure out, how am I going to get there? Once you develop those action steps of the things you need to do to achieve your goal, you have to figure out how much time do you need to devote to each of those action steps to get you where you want to go to. Then I go through this exercise with my clients called an ideal work week. You block out your time on a calendar for all the different components that you need to do. So for instance, you might need to do marketing or networking or outreach. You might need to set aside time to prepare proposals, meet with staff, do paperwork, all of those things. And they say, if you can put your tasks in a calendar, like your real calendar that you use, Excuse me a moment. Sorry about that. If you put those tasks in the calendar that you actually use, there's a much greater probability that you'll get it done. Good and bad news. We never achieve the ideal work week ever. There's always something in the week that happens that blows things up. So you account for that with what I call fail-safe time. For me, it's every Friday from 12 o'clock on. I don't schedule any appointments to catch up on things I might have to catch up with. I also put downtime in my regular weekly calendar. If you're coaching with me for an hour, I wait 15 minutes before I set my next appointment. You just can't go back to back to back to back to back to back all day long. It doesn't work. You'll be exhausted. You'll get behind, and you're not doing a service to your clients. So time blocking, time chunking, figuring out what gets in the way, thinking through, are you doing your most important tasks at the time your body clock is letting you be most productive? Oftentimes people come into the office with great intentions. Before they know it, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They've just done email and they've gone down 18 different rabbit holes, right? Figure out what's important, block your time. It will increase productivity in ways you can't even imagine. And I'm saying this from personal experience, and I'm saying it from what my clients tell me when they actually do it.
Yeah, I actually did it after I went to those. You gave a great session, I forget, for an insurance organization, I believe. And you went over this and you showed what your calendar looked like. And then I started making my calendar like that, but for me, and that made a huge difference. And it's such almost a simple change, but it's life changing in a lot of ways. And of course, we always got to constantly reprioritize and things. I know Cory and I were talking about calendar earlier too, so I know he's heard your talk and things. Cory, if you have any comments on that, otherwise we're going to wrap up.
Sure.
About
I mean, there's two things that I've seen too. One of, Bob and I and David, we all know Dawn Lyons, who is I'd say she's kind of a master of her calendar. So it's always kind of look at like who really does this well. And she plans her calendar out a year in advance and literally puts everything in it. Sometimes it can be somewhat limiting, right? Because you got to get into her calendar, but it also means that she really knows when is the right time to do something and, where things can fit in without getting discombobulated as someone is. Well, we don't want to become discombobulated, right? We want to be bobulated. Anyway.
Can I add a comment about
the other thing that we often do is we work with people to do an ideal calendar, which can also be part of that visioning process, right? Like, what's your ideal day look like, right? Is it, come into the office, have some coffee, and then, do the email or maybe do some sales calls and then as they kind of get that ideal calendar out, it makes it easier to put together the real calendar, which I'm sure Bob is familiar with too.
For sure. Can I make one more comment about
Sure.
that? So in the book, there is a sample ideal work week, but sometimes I'll tell people track their time for the last month or two, write down the categories of where you spend your time and put a pie chart together. Then using those same categories, put another pie chart together, this time putting down the ideal amount of time you'd like to spend in each of those categories. You find the two pie charts look very different in the slices of the pie, but in most cases, the biggest slice of the pie is in the category called miscellaneous. That typically does not move you quickly towards your goals. Got to figure out where you're spending your time and what the highest and best use of your time is.
Great. And we just have another minute or two, Bob. Perfect. I love that we were able to get to that calendar aspect. It's such a powerful thing. And it's such a strength of you as a business coach too. I'd encourage folks to reach out to you to find out, even if they just do a few sessions on calendar, it could completely revolutionize their productivity and their success. Just wanted to ask who you are looking for out there to work with as your ideal client.
Thank you for asking. So business owners, managers, salespeople, 60% of my business comes from people in the insurance and financial services and wealth advisory world. And 40% are business owners, entrepreneurs, and solopreneurs. But actually, anyone who knows that they could do better and who wants to do better, but is feeling a little stuck at how to get there would be a great client, great prospect for me. And as you guys know, I offer a free 45-minute coaching session for anyone who's interested, like to dip their toe in the water to see what coaching is all about.
Excellent. Well, we're going to leave it there. We're at time, Bob. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm very happy that we got through your book a little bit to introduce it. And I realized on the show, we can only introduce it enough to you just got to check it out. And it's actually free as a PDF on your website. I will put the link there, polaris1.com, I believe, or you can search for Polaris One. And we look forward to having you back and likely the second part of this year to talk about some more topics.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, Bob. David Kirsten and Cory not signing off for Quantum Leap. Thanks for joining us.